Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Easy English Stories. I hope you are having a peaceful and wonderful day. Today, I want to tell you a very special story. It is the story of Canada. Canada is a beautiful country with mountains, forests, rivers, lakes, snow, cities, and many different people. But today, we will not only talk about beautiful places, we will learn how Canada slowly became the country we know today. This story will help you practice your English listening, learn useful words, and understand history in simple English. So sit back, relax, listen carefully, and enjoy the story. Canada was not born in one day. Before Canada had a flag, before it had a capital city, and before it had one government, this land already had a long story. For thousands of years, many Indigenous peoples lived here. They had their own languages, homes, tradition, and ways of life. Later, people from Europe arrived. The French came. The British came. They explored the land, built settlements, traded, and competed for power. Slowly, this huge land began to change, and after many years, many decisions, and many difficult moments, a new country began to form. This is the story of how Canada was born. But to understand Canada, we must go back to the time before Canada had its name, long before the name Canada existed. This land was already full of life. There were great forests, wide rivers, deep lakes, high mountains, open plains, and long, cold winters. Many Indigenous peoples lived across this land for thousands of years. They were not one single group. They had many different languages, culture, stories, and ways of life. Some people lived near the ocean and used canoes to travel and fish. Some lived near rivers and lakes. Some followed animals across the plains. Some lived in forests, where they hunted, gathered food, and built strong communities. The land gave food, shelter, travel routes, and stories. For these peoples, the land was not just a place, it was home. Before Canada became a country, it was already home to many peoples. But one day, a simple word from this land would become the name of a future country. Now, let's talk about the name Canada. The name Canada has a very interesting story. It likely comes from the word Kannada. Kannada means village or settlement. A village is a small place where people live together. A settlement is also a place where people build homes and start a community. In 1535, Indigenous people in the area near present-day Quebec City used this word when speaking to the French explorer Jacques Cartier. They were talking about a village called Stadacona, but Cartier began to use the word Canada for a larger area. Slowly, this small word became the name of a much bigger land. And many years later, it became the name of a country. A word that once meant village slowly became the name of one of the largest countries in the world. But the story of Canada did not stop with a name. Soon, people from Europe began to arrive. After many years, people from far away began to arrive. They came from Europe. Some came by large ships across the Atlantic Ocean. They were explorers, sailors, traders, and settlers. They saw a huge land with forests, rivers, animals, and many natural resources. The French came to explore and trade. The British also came to explore and build settlements. At first, many Europeans wanted fish, for land, and trade routes. They met indigenous peoples who already knew the land very well. Indigenous peoples helped many newcomers survive, travel, and understand the land. But these meetings also brought many changes. New trade began, new settlements appeared, new conflicts slowly grew. The land was no longer only a home for its first peoples. It was becoming a place of meeting, trade, power, and competition. When Europeans arrived, the story of this land began to change forever. Soon, two powerful European groups wanted more influence here, the French and the British. As more Europeans arrived, two powerful groups became very important in this land. One group was the French. The other group was the British. The French built settlements, traded for fur, and created strong relationships in many areas. The British also built settlements and wanted more land, more trade, and more control. At first, these places were not one country. They were different colonies, settlements, trading posts, and communities. The French had influence in places like Quebec and along important rivers. The British had influence along the Atlantic coast and in other growing settlements. Both sides saw this land as valuable. There were rivers for travel, forests for resources, animals for fur, and land for new homes. But when two powerful groups want the same land, conflict often grows. Slowly, French North America and British North America became part of a much bigger struggle. This struggle would change the future of Canada. The land was rich, beautiful, and important. That is why many people wanted to control it. Then, in 1763, one big change shifted the balance of power. Then came a very important year, 1763. Before 1763, both France and Britain had power in North America. But after years of conflict, the balance of power changed. Britain became much stronger in this part of the world. France gave up most of its colonies in North America. This was a huge change. The land that would one day become Canada was now mostly under British control. But this did not mean the French language and French culture disappeared. Many French-speaking people still lived there. They had homes, churches, farms, families, and communities. So now, the British had a difficult question. How could they govern a land with different peoples, different languages, and different traditions? This question would become very important in the future story of Canada. 1763 changed the future of the northern land, but it did not erase the people who lived there. After this big change, the colonies had to ask a new question. Should they stay separate? Or should they come together? After 1763, the northern colonies were changing. There were different peoples, different languages, and different ways of life. Some people spoke English. Some people spoke French. Indigenous peoples still lived across the land. With their own communities and traditions, the colonies were growing. But they were also separate. Each colony had its own problems. They needed better roads, better trade, stronger defense, and more stable government. They also worried about the powerful country to the south, the United States. If the colonies stayed separate, they might be weak. But if they came together, they could be stronger. They could trade more easily. They could build railways. They could defend themselves better. And they could create a new political future. Slowly, leaders began to discuss a big idea. Maybe the colonies should not stay separate. Maybe they should become one union. This idea was not simple. There were many questions, many fears, and many different opinions. But this idea would lead to one of the most important moments in Canadian history. The colonies did not unite because everything was easy. They united because staying separate felt dangerous. And then, in 1867, this idea became real. Canada was born through Confederation. Then came the most important moment in this story. The year was 1867. After many discussions, the colonies decided to come together. This process was called Confederation. Confederation means different colonies joined together to form one larger country. On July 1, 1867, Canada became a new country. At first, Canada did not include all the land we see on the map today. It began with 4 provinces. These provinces were Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. This was the beginning of modern Canada. But Canada was still connected to Britain. It had more control over its own affairs. But it was not completely independent yet. Still, 1867 was a powerful beginning. A new country had been born, not through one simple event, but through many years of change, discussion, fear, hope, and compromise. Canada was not born from one battle or one person. It was born from a long process of coming together, but Canada in 1867 was still much smaller than the Canada we know today. The country would continue to grow. In 1867, Canada was born, but Canada was not yet the large country we see on the map today. It began with only 4 provinces: Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. After Confederation, the country began to grow. New lands and new provinces slowly joined Canada. Canada expanded toward the west. It also expanded toward the north. This expansion was not simple. The land was huge, cold, and difficult to travel across. There were forests, mountains, rivers, lakes, plains, and long winters. People needed roads, railways, towns, farms, and systems of government. The railway became very important. It helped connect different parts of the country. It helped people, goods, and ideas move across long distances. But expansion also brought serious problems. Many Indigenous peoples lost land, power, and control over their own lives. So the story of Canada's growth is not only a story of success, it is also a story of difficulty, change, and painful history. Slowly, Canada became larger and more connected, but the country was still learning what kind of nation it wanted to become. Canada grew across the land, but growth also brought difficult and painful changes. Canada was growing, but it was still not fully independent. Its road to independence would take many more years. Canada was born in 1867, but it was not fully independent yet. It still had a strong connection to Britain. Britain still had influence over some important decisions. But slowly, Canada began to control more of its own future. This did not happen in one day. It happened step by step. Canada built its own government. It made more decisions for its own people. It grew stronger as a country. Over time, Canadians began to see themselves not only as British subjects, but as people of their own country. This was an important change. Independence is not only about laws, it is also about identity. It is about knowing who you are. It is about deciding your own future. In 1931, Canada gained more legal independence through the Statute of Westminster. Many years later, in 1982, Canada gained full control over its constitution. This was another important step. Canada's road to independence was long and slow, but each step helped Canada become more clearly its own nation. Canada did not become independent all at once. It became independent slowly, through time, choice, and identity. After this long journey, Canada became the modern country many people know today. Today, Canada is one of the largest countries in the world. It has great mountains, deep forests, wide rivers, cold northern lands, and many beautiful lakes. It also has modern cities, busy streets, universities, businesses, and people from many different backgrounds. Canada is known for its diversity. People from many cultures live there. Many languages are spoken in homes, schools, and communities. But Canada has two official languages, English and French. This shows an important part of Canada's history. The story of French Canada and British Canada did not disappear. It became part of modern Canada's identity. Canada is also a country that continues to think about its past. The history of Indigenous peoples is an important part of the country's story. Canada's history includes beauty, growth, cooperation, conflict, and painful mistakes. Understanding this history helps us understand Canada more deeply. Canada was not created in one simple moment. It was shaped by land, people, language, culture, conflict, compromise, and time. And that is why the story of Canada is not only a story about a country, it is also a story about how people learn to live together. Modern Canada is the result of many histories meeting in one land. So, what can we learn from the story of Canada? Let's think about the lesson behind this history. So, what can we learn from the story of Canada? One lesson is these countries are not built in one day. They are built slowly, through people, choices, problems, and time. Canada's story began long before it became a country. Indigenous peoples lived on the land for thousands of years. Then Europeans arrived. The French came. The British came. Different peoples, languages, and cultures met on the same land. Sometimes they cooperated. Sometimes they competed. Sometimes they made painful mistakes. But over time, Canada became a country shaped by many histories. This teaches us something important. A country is not only land on a map. A country is people, memory, language, culture, and identity. To understand a country, we must understand its story. And when we learn history in English, we do two things at the same time. We improve our English, and we understand the world more deeply. A country is not only a place on a map, it is a story of people, memory, and time. Now, let's finish our story and practice a few important English words from today's lesson, and that is the story of how Canada was born. Canada did not begin in one day. It was shaped slowly by land, people, languages, cultures, conflict, cooperation, and time. We learned that Indigenous peoples lived on this land long before Canada became a country. We learned how the name Canada came from a word meaning village or settlement. We learned about the French, the British, Confederation, expansion, and independence. And we also learned something important about English. When you listen to a story in English, you do not only learn words, you learn how English sounds. You learn sentence patterns. You learn history, ideas, and emotions. So, if this story was useful for you, listen to it again. The second time, you will understand more. The third time, you will remember more words. And slowly, your English listening will become stronger. Now, I have one question for you. What did you learn from the story of Canada? Please write your answer in the comments. You can write one simple sentence in English. For example, I learned that Canada was born slowly. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to Easy English Stories. Thank you for listening. Keep practicing, keep listening, and I will see you in the next story. Every country has a story, and every story can help us learn English.